It should be no secret that event modes in a tower defense game make for much of its staple content. You know, the kind of content that remains iconic, that defines the identity of the game, and overall just draws in the most attention and fan content that could be created in the community. And for games like Tower Defense X, that is no exception. Tower Defense X, taking on its unique, more realistic, edgy, militaristic approach, is the kind of game where you'd find it difficult to conceive a fantastic, whimsical event, the likes of which you've seen in other tower defense games. However, TDX has had plenty, and I mean plenty, of times where the quality of events has surpassed what the community expected. One of those times in particular stands out for being the most iconic, in my personal opinion, and that is The Awakening. Now, the reason why The Awakening, or Halloween 2024, was so iconic was because of the introduction of so many fun gimmicks, content, and overall new modes of grinding that were introduced together with a bunch of features. And when I'm analyzing all of these together, I can see the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what stands out, besides the introduction of no-path fights and the introduction of defend the objective game modes, is the second night. Now, you might be wondering, but Zob, how can you pick the second night? The only thing it introduces is multilane, the map is not complex, and overall the mode isn't that big of a deal. Well, I'm just gonna say that you're completely utterly wrong and you should revise your facts, you stupid. All that aside, today I'm gonna be telling you why Night 2 of the Awakening event was arguably one of the best events in the game's history and how it shaped the game's identity for the better. Now, we gotta understand what exactly makes an event good. And I have narrowed it down to 4 important points. That being, new themes and narratives for the lore, new gameplay, new gimmicks, and engaging content overall in the event. A fine combination of these can be seen in a lot of modern tower defense events, especially as they diverge more and more into lore content, as well as upping their quality with each increase in budget. Now, for Tower Defense X, The Awakening is unique because it was created during a time when the TDX team was much smaller than what it is now, and it did not have the resources as other iconic titles such as Tower Defense Simulator. And yet they somehow managed to pull off some of the coolest looking aspects of all of the 4 previous points, and I am here to break them down for you. Now, if we're to take a look at the theming for The Awakening, it's this apocalyptic, interdimensional scenario where demons and machineries are appearing to take over our world because they're pissed off at us for harnessing their resources. That alone is enough to make an entire Doom game, but incorporating it in a tower defense game? That's pretty crazy. Not only that, but Night 2 specifically takes place in the Factorium, which, if we pay attention to the event notes from that time period, is one of Dr. Xenon's factories. It's one of the first times we actually step foot into her territory, even though technically it's no longer hers after the engineer took it over. The engineer is the final boss of this event, and I'll get back to him later. He is very important to discuss. Now, already from the introduction of the event, you are greeted with multilane. This is the first ever time we see multilane in Tower Defense X, and although it is quite basic, it is executed well. The straightforward map with a divergence at the middle and a reunification at the end serves as a way to double up the number of enemies, while also allowing you to invest into towers with great AoE capabilities that allow you to diversify your loadout in very fun ways. Even in normal mode, you are encouraged to get spawner towers like barracks combined with something that is long ranged, in order to counter the enemies more effectively due to the range of many spawned troops covering both lanes, and thus being incredibly cost efficient. Right from the get-go, you've got to be incredibly vigilant with how you manage yourselves. You are gonna be bombarded with enemies almost infinitely that are gonna constantly break paths, and a lot of the times said enemies might have abilities that can synergize with enemies from the opposing lane or the current lane that distracts you from enemies coming down the opposite side. Now this sounds confusing, but this is gonna make a lot of sense with this example. Take the wave with the nailheads. And I mean the one that spams Skulltists as well. You've got to worry about a swarm of Skulltists overwhelming you with their resistances, and then there's the Nailheads that constantly give them shield, which is just adding on top of your problems. And if they get past a certain point of the map, it's just game over. You've got to very carefully micromanage your towers in order to ensure that this does not happen. We're also introduced to very cool lore themes, such as the earliest hints to the behemoth actually in-game, the engineer flaunting his intellect on us, and more importantly, a greater elaboration on the awakened motif on being in our world. We finally learn that this is where they develop most of their machineries, and that the engineer himself will be leading a charge into a later chapter, even though we do defeat him later, but that's not important. It's a very neat build-up. The music, oh my god, the music. It just adds to the atmosphere so much. You really feel engaged in combat with the engineer's forces, and you also feel like raving out because it is the spooky season, and thus it is warranted. Speaking of the engineer's narration, this guy just somehow manages to evoke charisma in just being text that is displayed with an image. You can immediately tell that he is not just a threat, but a cunning intellect that uses his resources efficiently in order to crush you despite us having way more resources than they do. And when I say that he has a cunning intellect, I am not joking. Besides sending his own ravenous hordes of villagers and machinery at us, he's even managed to steal some from Dr. Xenon, claiming that he does respect her work, which should make us a little bit afraid of what she's cooking up in Nightmare Mode. Meet the Corrupted Predators. These guys are some of the cleverest mini-bosses I've encountered in a tower defense game. Not only do they take what the Predator already had, but they amplify on it with a rush attack, which just makes them move faster, and they even take the Void's corruption ability and implement it in two ways, for a laser attack and for leeches that take over a tower's brain. These are some of the coolest visuals they could have given to mini-bosses, and clever reuses for mechanics that we have seen before, and they just hold you on edge because on one hand you've got to keep your towers uncorrupted, and on the other hand, you've got to somehow manage to stop these guys before they rush you to the end together with their regular predator friends. This not only fits the lore of the Awakened being able to harness Calamity energy this way, but it also shows just what the team at TDX is capable with if they're given enough time to cook on even the smallest events. This has always been one of my favorite parts of the event, and it just gets better from here. Now, for a lot of the mode, after the Corrupted Predators pass, you might see some reused enemies from Endless Mode. Now, I know that reused enemies are not often appreciated as it is considered lazy design, but in this case it just makes sense, because with the Corrupted Predators, it's been established that the engineer has stolen Xenon's technology and has modified it to serve him instead. So seeing endless enemies sent at us like anti-golems, grumbles, hell, even avatars later on, it just makes sense that he would steal all of the inanimate, mechanical stuff and force it to serve him, as well as just the general idea of having to face these enemies on a medium where the economy is much more tight-knit, which actually makes them quite a bit of a challenge if you're not ready. Not to mention that later on, they send 6 redacted enemies towards us, which just further alludes to the lore of Dr. M being one of the Calamity God things, not sure how that's gonna work yet, as well as what we're gonna see later on from the Calamity as their story gets developed. Now, I know I've kind of beaten around the bush, but I think that it is time to get to the main attraction of this mode, and that is the Vile Engineer.
I put myself together with the pieces of your demise.
In normal mode, the Vile Engineer himself is already quite imposing, with his machine guns, the lyrics in his themes, the gas attacks, the helicopter EMP, which is one of the first anti-air attacks we've ever seen. They all serve to show his mechanical prowess, as well as the fact that despite being quite simplistic in nature, he's still a force to be reckoned with. But that comes nowhere close to what he's like in Nightmare Mode. There, he doesn't just send a couple of nil golems, he sends an entire horde at us, and not just spawned from the portal, but also dropping from above. One that you have to stop at the front like in normal mode, and one that you have to stop at the back. You cannot afford to waste a single second to get towers with long range, as well as preparing your other AoE control appropriately in order to intercept incoming threats. You also get more anti-golems, you even get avatars later on that you need to watch for at the back, and the engineers spawn together with the freaking heretic from night 1. Like, that was something I genuinely did not expect the first time I played. Much less so seeing the heretic buffing the engineer's attack power, while the engineer heals the heretic. This kind of boss synergy, it's something that we just don't see often in these games anymore. Even with the new reworked bosses right now, they don't really carry any sort of synergy. It just feels like they're mashed together and it just doesn't work. But no, here they pulled up a perfect synergy that just is cool to watch. As for taking down the engineer, it's a race against the clock, which is one of my favorite aspects about tower defense games. You have to micromanage in order to kill all of his incoming minions, the new batch of corrupted predators, and then efficiently kill the heretic while getting to the engineer, because otherwise they're just gonna keep infinitely buffing each other. While all along, you need to be careful of the engineer's various attacks. And especially that EMP, which is used to take down helicopters. It's funny how the guy that easily takes down helicopters is the guy whose mode is perfectly balanced around helicopter. Like, you're not gonna get very far without helicopter, unless you have some absolutely insane skills that could be better used in nightmare mode. And even as you fight him, his theme keeps on intensifying. It just lets you know that they will take you as he gets closer to the base, and you have to frantically spam as much damage and bait as him as possible to keep him in place before you inevitably lose. This kind of boss battle design is the perfect kind of boss battle design. It keeps you on edge, it forces you to strategize, and it offers you some of the coolest little gimmicks and mechanics. I know I've said that a lot, but come on, you gotta see it here. It's a lot of cool stuff that is just merged together super well and makes for an unforgettable experience the first time you play it. And you can play it again since, they were brought back. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the engineer is actually not that great, or that Night 2 is not as peak as I'm talking about? It could be valid given all of the other bosses and events we have in the game, but I really wanted to show you guys how you can appreciate the smaller stuff about the game, and just the kind of effort that can go into the game with enough time given. And I really want to hear what you guys think about this down below in the comments. Thank you very much for hearing me ramble about a tower defense game again, and I hope you have a good day. Bye bye!